Okay, well, this is the Big Bang Life. Rick calling in. I'm here today with New York Times best-selling author Timothy Zahn. Timothy Zahn is known for his 1984 Hugo Award winning best-selling novel Cascade Point. He's also most notable for 10 Star Wars Expanded Universe books, particularly the Thrawn trilogy. And in my opinion, and many people's opinion, the Thrawn trilogy was a great inspiration and really the revival of Star Wars Expanded Universe novels in general. And also, Timothy Zahn has been known to has also written several other great works, including the Cobra series and the Black Collar trilogy. Tim, it's very nice to meet you.
Thanks.
So basically, I just wanted to ask a few questions. First one is, has science fiction always been like your genre of choice?
Pretty much. I've done a couple of fantasy-ish short stories and one novel that's almost fantasy, but it does have science fiction basis. Mostly, though, I grew up reading science fiction, and I liked some fantasy, but the harder science fiction was always my preferred genre.
Okay, good. Yeah, I've been a huge science fiction fan since probably 2005. And actually, Star Wars, when I read Star Wars, the Thrawn trilogy was the very first trilogy, very first Star Wars books that I read.
There wasn't much before that.
Yeah, there wasn't.
There were
Eye of the, what was it? Splinter of the Mind's Eye?
Splinter of the Mind's Eye, and there were the Han Solo and Lando Calrissian
Right.
trilogies, but all of those had been before the movies, so they could use Han Solo or Lando Calrissian, but none of the other main characters.
Right.
Heir to the Empire was the first book that was allowed to go past Jedi and use everybody who'd been in the movies.
Wow. Yeah, that's something I actually did not know. Did you always want to be a writer?
No, I was going to be a physicist.
Really?
I was working on a doctorate in physics. My project wasn't working well. I started writing as a hobby. This is in grad school. And I sold a story, sold a second story. The day I found out that I had sold my second story, I also learned that my advisor had died overnight of a heart attack, leaving me with this project that wasn't working and would never work. It was a mathematical thing, and one of the other professors explained after that what the fatal flaw was in it. So they said I could start with a new professor, a new project, 8 to 10 hours of work a day, 6 days a week, 2 years, I could probably get a doctorate. And I worked for a semester with a new professor, discovered I couldn't start a new project and write at the same time. I just didn't have enough mental energy for it. I had time, but no energy.
Right.
So in December of 1979, I decided to quit the department and try writing full time. So that was a hobby that got drop-kicked into a career.
Oh, wow. Well, it's a good career choice.
Well, I like to think the fields of writing and physics have both benefited from
Absolutely. So, when did your, so obviously it was during your time through school that you really got inspired to write more, or was there any earlier inspirations?
I used to do colored pencil drawings and make up stories to go along with them as just a hobby.
Yeah.
But I had not really done much real writing until that November of 1975. There was a very bad TV show I watched, and I turned it off and said, I could write better than that. And that's when I sat down and wrote my first real story with an ending and all, which wasn't very good at all, but showed how much fun it was. So from 75 to December of 78, when that first story sold, I did it as a hobby in my spare time. As I said, my advisor was out of town, my project wasn't working, so I had lots of spare time on my hand.
Yeah. What was the beginning of your writing career like right as you entered into it?
Something of a panic.
Okay.
My wife and I had been married a grand total of 4 months when we decided to make this shift from aspiring physicist to struggling science fiction writer, which thrilled her parents no end, of course. They did come around eventually. We had an inexpensive place to live. We'd both brought some savings into the marriage. Anna had a job. It was not a huge job, but it brought in some income. So we settled on $1,000. If I could make $1,000 that first year, we would consider that this was something to keep going with. In September, I had sold, I think, $366, like one story, and we're starting to look at the want ads. And then the time delay between the time you send out a story and either have it rejected, send it out again, and start getting approved, that time delay kicked in. And suddenly, the last few months of the year, stories that I'd sent out were suddenly being bought. And by the end of that year, we'd grossed about $2,000. So thought this was a good sign and kept going. For aspiring writers in your audience, I started professional writing 1980. I started making a living in 1984. So even writing full-time is not a guarantee you're going to make enough money to live on.
Right.
So the key and the trick is you keep at it.
So, for me, I've always been a Star Wars fan, and really, I'll be honest, all the books I've ever read were your Star Wars books.
Okay, thank you.
They're by far my favorite, and it really, really drove me to read all of the Star Wars fantasy novels, especially post, ABY, after the Battle of Yavin. So after reading that series, it was just really catapulted me into the other books, and I've been enmeshed in everything, all the way up to the legacy books right now with Troy Denning and Michael Stackpole. I think he's still writing them.
No, Aaron Alston, I think, was
Aaron
in
Alston,
there, and I forget the third writer on that.
I can't remember the third one.
Yeah, that was something they came up with late in the run of the 9-book series with 3 authors alternating books.
Right. And they've done a good job so far. But Thrawn Trilogy, of course, if those of you that don't know, it's 3 books: The Heir to the Empire, which was written in 1991, Dark Force Rising, 1992, and Last Command in 1993. One question I really want to ask was, prior to publication, what did you expect? And then after publication, what did you expect from the reader? What was your reaction to the reader's response to the books?
Well, before, that's a very simple one. Nobody had any idea if Star Wars was even, something anybody cared about anymore. Star Trek was big. Star Wars had nothing in it to come out since the last movie in '83. So I know they wanted to print 100,000 hardcovers. They got orders back for only 70,000. So the booksellers weren't all that enthused about it either. That first 70,000 were gone in 2 weeks, and they were rushing back to press. It caught everybody by surprise, except the guy who had started the whole process, Lou Aronica at Bantam, who had been saying all along this was a license for Bantam to print money. But he was the only one who really had faith in the project. He was going to push through, make it a hardcover because it's going to be a serious book, not just some throwaway paperback type of thing. So nobody had any expectations whatsoever. As I say, after the book came out and people were snatching them up, they rushed back into print. They rushed to make a new contract with Bantam for 12 more books, different writers and such. Caught all of us by surprise. I mean, I'd been hoping it would do well, but there was no way I would gamble on that. So the fan response was just tremendous, wonderful. It was vindication that I was doing something right. So yeah, it was very, very nice, and the fans have been with me ever since.
Yeah, and duly so. I mean, they've been great, and you've come out with several others. But the Thrawn Trilogy, what other books can you mention real quick to the group? Because there's so many of them.
In the Star Wars?
In the Star Wars.
Okay, after the Thrawn Trilogy comes Spectre of the Past and Vision of the Future, which together are the Hand of Thrawn duology.
Right.
Then Survivor's Quest, Outbound Flight, Allegiance, Choices of One, and Scoundrels.
Right. Great. Thank you so much for that. That way everybody at home can definitely get into those. What got you interested in the first place in writing the Star Wars novels?
I was not, I wasn't interested. What happened, as I say, Lou Aronica started the whole thing, contacting Lucasfilm. Lucasfilm decided they wanted to restart the adult fiction line. Bantam and Lucasfilm made an agreement. Bantam's editors got together and made up a list of authors they thought could handle Star Wars. Lucasfilm decided they liked my style best of the list they were given, and I got a completely out of the blue phone call from my agent in November of '89. So, no, I was not petitioning for it. I was not hoping. It was just, Tim, we've got a very interesting offer here, I think was Russ's actual words. So it was handed to me on a platinum platter.
Well, it definitely worked out really well, and that's impressive. You got it in 1989. You managed to really get one every consecutive year.
Yeah.
Plus, I mean, pretty much only had like what, 2 years until the trilogy was out.
Yeah, I mean, it was in '89, and I couldn't really start writing till I think May or so of 1990.
Wow.
Because maybe it was April, May, sometime like that. Because they would not, Lucasfilm. Let's see, how does it work? Bantam and Lucasfilm needed to have their contract before I could get a contract for the book with Bantam, and until I had a contract, nobody at Lucasfilm would look at my outline and pass on it, and tell me that this was okay. So there was no point in really starting until that procedure had gone into effect and finished up, because just as likely they're going to unravel my first 6 chapters or something and have to start over again.
Yeah.
So I actually had less time than I was expecting, but it worked out okay. They got rushed the thing into production. There were there were a couple of semi-major points in the outline that had to be changed, and then lots of little tweakings once the novel was done. But Lucasfilm has been very easy to work with over the years. They have never said, you must do it this way because we say so.
Yeah.
They would say, we don't think this fits what Star Wars is. And if I could say, well, here's why I think it works with Star Wars and why it's necessary for the book, if I could persuade them, they would reverse their decision. So there were never lines drawn in the sand. They never got snitty about the fact we own this and you're just a writer. They would listen to my arguments, and I would listen to their arguments, and we would generally find a compromise that was good for both of us.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, which is why I've done 10 Star Wars books and not 3.
Right.
Because if they were a bear to work with, I would never have gone back to them.
Yeah, and that's the amazing thing with Star Wars and even Star Trek universe. I mean, the flexibility that you see in those genres. I mean, it's just amazing. The amount of books that people have been able to produce, and it's created, the canon that we all love and adore. Now, what I was wondering about, you created 2 major characters within the universe: Mara Jade Skywalker and Grand Admiral Thrawn, which both are still mentioned to this day in recent novels that are being published.
Yes.
What, may I ask, inspired you to create Mara Jade and also Grand Admiral Thrawn?
I'd always thought that the opening of Return of the Jedi, the rescue of Han, was disconnected from the rebellion plot line, which it is. I mean, it's the rescue of Han. But I thought, when I started outlining the books, I thought it'd be nice to link those 2 plot lines together. Okay, well, since at the end of Empire, Vader has offered Luke an alliance to overthrow the Emperor might not have been happy with this whole thing. The easiest way to short-circuit that is get rid of Luke. Okay, Han has been captured. This is a likely place for Luke to show up. Let's send an agent to kill him. Okay, what kind of agent? First of all, female, because there aren't enough strong females, and I thought she could be the same kind of personality, conflict foil to Luke that Han was to Leia. Just kind of flipped over. He's the farm boy. She can be something different. She has to be a Force user in order to defeat another Force user like Luke. And she has to be out of the chain of command so Vader will not get wind of what is happening.
Right.
You put those together and the Emperor's hand falls out of the equation. And that was the origin of Mara. Thrawn was similar in that when I was offered the books, I didn't want to do what Lucas had already done. That meant no Death Star, no Emperor type, no Vader type. Okay, what would be a good villain? Vader rules by fear, pretty much. The Emperor rules by trickery, coercion, probably some bribery and general manipulation. A more dangerous villain is one who rules by loyalty, because his people will fight for him even if he's not in the room. Okay, so what kind of person would they be loyal to? Well, he's got to be tactically brilliant, so they know they've got a good chance of winning. He's got to be the type that will not waste troops. You know, he will not just throw troops in because this is my battle, I'm going to win it. When he sees he's going to lose it, back off and pick another time and place. The Heir to the Empire 20th anniversary, I've got about 7 or 8 qualities that I mark in the commentary as they go by. But it's basically somebody that they would be loyal to. And then as an added thing, since the Emperor clearly doesn't like aliens, make him at least near human, not quite human. Because if the Emperor will make him a Grand Admiral, he must consider Thrawn to be something very, very special. And you put all that together, and again, Thrawn just falls out of the equation. Then, of course, I've got to write brilliant tactics for him, which is a lot harder than it looks, because he's smarter than I am.
Yeah, tactics were brilliant. I love the fact that you incorporated culture into his obsession.
Yeah,
essentially.
His planning involves how to fight this people, knowing their cultural weaknesses.
Yeah, and that was one thing I always loved when they entered back into his room, and it was a different theme every time, with different cultures, and talk about it. It was just amazing. I really ate into that, and I mean that's really helped create a lot more writing for future authors when they write stories too. So I thought that was really awesome. Now, most of all the novels, since we're still on Mara Jade and Grand Admiral Thrawn, they all seem to always go back to those two characters in your later books. What kind of draws you back to that theme?
Well, if the Star Wars is a huge canvas, the Star Wars expanded universe, a huge canvas that people have been drawing on and painting on and such, I've kind of carved out a little corner of my own, starting with the Thrawn trilogy, and then get some more background for Thrawn and some more relationship stuff with Mara and Luke and the Hand of Thrawn duology. Do some stuff here. They asked me to do an outbound flight, so I linked Survivor's Quest and outbound flight. Then I decided the post-Jedi, Return of the Jedi era is starting to get crowded. The Rebellion era, the classic movies, is in some ways more fun, and I get to see, watch Luke and Han and Leia grow and try to figure out where they're going between episodes 4 and 5. And I can show Mara at her height of her power as Emperor's Hand, so that's where Allegiance and Choices of One came. And The Scoundrels was just fun. I wanted to do Star Wars meets Ocean's 11.
Yeah,
and
I like
let's do a heist.
Absolutely.
So it's not a matter of so much of always coming back to the characters. Okay. The era, the interactions are interesting. There's some development to be done here, and in my corner, I mean, Thrawn and Mara are prime movers and shakers. They're just, because of who they are, they're going to be influencing events. And I got a story to tell, and this is something that Thrawn would be involved in. Let's do that story. This is something Mara would be involved in. Let's do that story. So it's not a, what can I tell with Mara? It's more of a, here's an interesting story, and Mara would fit right into it.
And one thing with Mara, how did you feel when Mara passed?
I disagreed with that decision for similar, not just because she was my creation, but similar reasons to why I disagreed with Chewbacca being killed.
Yeah.
But she's not my character. She's owned by Lucasfilm.
Right.
They made the decision. They didn't invite me to have any input. In fact, I didn't know about it until about 2 months before the book came out. Apparently, somebody had made a decision not to tell me. So I think it was not the best thing to do. I think it was not done realistically for the character, but we're all professionals here. You sign away your characters and your storyline and everything you invent to Lucasfilm. That's part of the deal.
Right.
And you just accept that.
Yeah, makes sense. Now, one thing, like I mentioned before, your works did revive the expanded universe and really open the door to it. How do you feel about that when people label you as the revivalist of the
Well,
genre?
it's pretty clear that any Star Wars book that came out in 1991 would have been snatched up by the fans. I mean,
Yeah.
I mentioned that 70,000 first printing was gone within 2 weeks. And aside from 5,000 of my close fans and my mother, nobody was buying it because my name was on the cover. They were buying it because it was Star Wars.
Right.
Now, I like to think that after those first couple of weeks, word of mouth helped keep it going. Rather than reviving Star Wars, probably a better analogy is I got to be the one to stick a fork in the pie crust and show how much steam was really underneath that. I mean, Star Wars fans were quiet, sure, but they hadn't gone away. They were quiet because there was nothing to glom onto until Heir to the Empire came out. So I think any Star Wars book would have hit that.
Yeah.
Would it have sold as well? We'll never know. Mine got to be first.
Yeah.
So no, I got to kick start the thing, or to jump on the wave that was waiting to come out anyway.
Right. Any plans or motivations to produce any future works? I read in an interview not long ago that you wanted to do maybe a novel that's more family focused.
That
Was that accurate?
thoughts. Well, I had thoughts about that, but then as they continued with the timeline and they started doing things with Jason and Jaina, I realized, and Ben, I realized some of what I had been envisioning isn't going to work anymore. And then, of course, Lucasfilm was sold to Disney, and at the moment, the book line is kind of on hold. There are, I think, 4 books going to be brought out, but those were, I think, books that were in the pipeline, and they are classic era or just before classic era or late Clone Wars, so they're not near the sequels at all. We don't know what's going to happen to the book line. They may hold off until the sequels come out and then start a new expanded universe from that. They might let us do more in the classic era if it's been passed by the story group that's trying to keep a continuity with everything from now on. At the moment, we have no idea. I'm certainly game. I've got a couple of ideas to pitch to them, classic, and of course, once I see the movies, I'm sure I'll have other ideas to pitch to them.
Sure.
I'm available, I know that, but until they make a decision at the top, and that's Kathleen Kennedy and Mouse both, there's no way of knowing what's going to happen. I'm available. I've got more stories to tell.
Awesome.
But
Yeah.
we'll just have to see.
We'll have to see. Well, I do want to mention that your Heir to the Empire came out with its 25th anniversary, I believe.
20th anniversary.
20th anniversary last year, right?
Or
was it
it
this
was
year?
11. It was
Was it
2 or 3 years
2000?
ago.
Was it
Yeah.
2 or 3?
It was actually its
Gosh,
20th
time
anniversary.
flies.
Yeah.
I remember buying it, but it feels like a year ago. But
No,
I don't know. My
a year
brain
or so,
shot.
a year and a half ago is when Scoundrels came out.
That's okay. That's where I'm mixing it up. Well, just so people know, the 20th anniversary came out, and it is excellent. I got it on Audible with Mark Thompson. Phenomenal.
Does it have the commentary along with it?
Mhm.
Okay.
It's really good, and you know, if you guys can get it through Audible, it's a great piece to get. But yeah, I just
I also
wanted to
bring
mention
copies to conventions to sell
Oh,
because they're
yeah.
not easily available.
Yeah, it was really good. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. It was nice just recapping back to the old book, and it did have a different flair to it because of the way he presented it from the old audio book that they did on it. So
It was also the unabridged. The original
Right.
audio was severely abridged.
Yes,
So
yes.
this was the chance to get the whole thing on
in there.
audio.
Okay, so we talked. What are your hopes for the new Star Wars films? And going to well, first, what are your feelings of transitioning to Disney, and what are your hopes for Disney with the new films coming out?
First of all, I think if Lucas is going to sell, I think Disney is a good home. They have bought Pixar, they've bought Marvel, they have not screwed them up. I think we've got a good chance they will not screw up Lucasfilm either. And when you spend $4 billion of your money for something, you really don't want to mess up what made it worth $4 billion. So I think there's some good possibilities there. The other, what I'd really like to see, and what Disney does best, is to see some kind of good family interaction. Most of the family interactions in the original Star Wars and the prequels have been screwed up. Many of them manipulated to be that way, but we haven't seen something. I think back to The Incredibles and the family there, that there's some squabbles, there's some fusses, but when push comes to shove, they are united and they are kicking butt and taking names. I would like to see the Skywalker family fussing with their kids, fussing with the Luke and Han and Leia, and then a threat comes together. Okay, mount up, we're heading out into that.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, that's. Well, it was a pleasure to meet with you,
Thank you.
and thank you so much for your time. And hopefully, we'll cross paths again.